Well, let's now speak to a former flag bearer aspirant and also former Chief Executive Officer of the National Health Insurance Authority, a man who's been heavily involved in the return of the former flag bearer, former President John Dramani Mahama, as he attempts to make another comeback to the presidency. I'm talking about Mr. Sylvester Mensah. He's joined us in the studio for a quick conversation about what to expect now that the former president has picked his nomination forms, and he'll be filing it at the appropriate time. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's always a pleasure seeing you, sir.
My greatest pleasure being with you this evening.
How is it going? I mean, we saw the footages on TV. In fact, it's gone viral. It's all over the place. We saw the former president picking, not he personally, but we saw Professor Alavi picking the nomination forms on his behalf. Why has he decided to do it now?
Well, the time is now. The party has announced the timetable, and you cannot campaign ahead of the timetable, and so he is operating right within the confines of the law, of the regulations, of the guidelines, and of course, as leader, he needs to set example. There was no point starting a campaign when the guidelines and the season has not been, as it were, commissioned.
Right. It's a three-day window, isn't it?
Yes, well, 22nd to 24th.
To 24th.
Yes.
So basically 3 days, isn't it?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. So the reason I asked why now, because he's been heavily tipped to be the man to beat in this race, but he's the one who's actually picked his nomination forms first. I mean, as somebody who should have said that, well, I would win anyway, so I probably could have picked the form tomorrow or tomorrow next, but he's picked the form first. We're told that Kojo Bonsu has also gotten somebody to pick the form on his behalf. And we just read Dr. Kwamina Dufo also announcing that tomorrow he'll be picking his form. So it was within that context I asked why he decided to pick his first. But so now that he's picked his nomination forms, what are we to expect?
Well, you pick your nomination forms and you, as it were, get signatories, nominations, people to endorse your form. And submission comes in. But of course, it also means that the campaign has begun.
Okay.
And so this would see former President Mahama going around the country and, as it were, giving his message to the good people of this country, but importantly to our delegates.
Your opponents are asking, why does the former president want to make a comeback?
Well, I think it is not just about a former president wanting to make a comeback. It's about the party and various organs and structures in the party impressing upon him to make a comeback. Of course, we saw how he brought dignity and integrity to the office of president, and we saw how his humility and nobility masked his extensive experience and expanded capacity and capability. We saw the demonstration of that, as it were, manifesting in his achievements and of course, what we achieved over the period. And he's the party's best foot forward, and we give him our full support, and we believe that the time has come for him to pick his nomination forms and begin campaign. Of course, his performance in government was telling, and you could tell right from the outset when the MPP took over, and particularly around 2019, when it became quite obvious that the government had become clueless. Perhaps that was when a lot of people came to the realization that we had a gem in President Rawlings. We had a gem in President Mahama.
Right.
And everyone began to look back and reflect and to compare. And Ghanaians have come to the clear conclusion that President Mahama offers the best type of leadership the NDC and Ghana can have.
How did you come by this conclusion? When you say Ghanaians, are you saying Ghanaians as in based on what?
Of course, we've done some surveys, we've done some conversations and focus group discussions across the country, and it is quite obvious that Ghanaians are tired of the MPP recklessness in borrowing, mismanagement of the economy, nepotism and corruption, and they believe that the time for change has come.
But the same Ghanaians sacked him in 2016, and they said they didn't want him. They made him lose close to 1 billion votes.
Well, you need to look at that in context.
Okay.
No government, or no party for that matter, has ever won after 2 terms.
Right.
And so losing 2016 was really no loss, because essentially, if you look at our electoral history, you would observe that every government has a maximum of 2 terms, and the government changes. All the people of this country would want to have a change. And so, throughout the Fourth Republic, no one ever won a 3rd term. And the NDC at the time had gone through 2 terms. And so, really, there was nothing to complain about.
Right.
Again, if you look at the 2020 elections, that was a midterm election. No party and no individual had ever won or has ever won in midterm elections. And so those 2 elections are not a good basis for assessing his performance. If there's any time that the people of this country would want to, as it were, assess the performance of former President John Dramani Mahama, it is in these 2024 elections.
Okay.
And this is when we want to see what the outcome would be. Of course, we can see clearly that the mood of this country is clearly for change. We can see that disappointment and frustrations all around. We can see how the economy has been, as it were, brought to ground zero. We can see how everything in this country appears to have been messed up. The public service, the civil service, completely out of shape.
Right.
There's no facet of society today in this country where you could clearly say that there is some progress and there's some hope.
But he's coming up against Dr. Kwabena Dufo, Mr. Kojo Bonsu, the former Ashanti Regional Minister and former mayor of Ashanti Region. He's also coming up with, this a guy who's actually just come up, but the name has just escaped me. He says he's a contractor and he believes that he has what it takes to reposition the NDC. You're saying that amongst all these competitors, John Mahama stands tall.
Well,
and in the last elections, John Mahama garnered about 94%. What's your prediction?
That's the beauty of NDC's internal democracy. We believe that political parties are the breeding grounds for developing democratic aspirations, democratic feelings, democratic tendencies. And so, yes, the NDC is preparing the way for inculcating the whole spirit of internal democracy into our members. And so, great, it's competition. And the NDC welcomes it. And that is the whole purpose of going through a primaries. Otherwise, I'm sure the party would have announced a single candidate. But no, we believe in democracy, and anyone who has interests has a right to contest.
Except that you believe that he's the man.
Well, I have my full support for President John Dramani Mahama, and I know that many share the same. And I believe strongly that he will win massively.
When he does win massively, and that's my penultimate question, when he does win massively, what is the new John Mahama going to look like? Because there was a John Mahama that some Ghanaians rejected. Is he going to be the same John Mahama?
Well, when you say some Mahama, if you say, a John Mahama that some Ghanaians rejected, we need to look at that in context, yes, as I've explained.
Well, you've explained.
Earlier.
It's a two-term.
Yeah. So I think
you don't see it as a rejection?
No, I think that the party ended its two-term in government,
right,
and exited. I think I will look at it within that context.
Rather than the personality.
Right. And so, yes, but again, the name John Dramani Mahama today brings a lot of hope to many Ghanaians. And Ghanaians remember him for the dignity and integrity he brought to the presidency and the values and virtues that he espoused and lived by. Ghanaians remember him as a nation builder who, under his tenure, saw, as it were, unprecedented development projects, infrastructural projects in this country. Ghanaians remember him, how this economy was managed under him. We never had, as it were, a GDP exceeding 100%. We never had a situation where our debts were unsustainable. We had a president who had his eyes on the ball and a president who ensured that on a regular basis, he knew exactly the stage the economy was at and would not, as it were, engage in reckless borrowing as we have experienced. We saw $3 billion borrowed in 2018, another $3 billion in 2019, $3 billion in 2020, $3 billion in 2021. Within 4 years, we have borrowed, $12 billion. I think that was completely needless and reckless. President Mahama never went on that trajectory because he had the love of the country at heart, and he understood the macroeconomic fundamentals and how to sustain and maintain them. And I think that Ghana was on the right path for growth.
Do you share the opinion of some who say they are worried that should John Mahama win the 2024 elections, he'll be inheriting an economy that would make it very difficult for him to deliver on the mandate that he's made to the people?
Well, that's quite obvious, but not an inability to develop, as it were, deliver on his mandate. Of course, inflation now is in excess of 54%. Our debt stock has risen from 121 to over 505 billion. Our debts are unsustainable. We have about the worst economy as we speak today. And we're engaged in debt rescheduling just for the simple reason that we're unable to meet our maturing obligations. But of course, the NDC and President Mahama have a plan. And of course, this is not the forum to
share the plan,
to unveil that plan.
Okay.
But we have a strategy and we have a solution to some of these problems.
Okay.
Of course, he has indicated earlier that his focus will be on 1, job creation, 2, the economy of this country, health, education, and agric. These are the early pronouncements that he had made over a couple of months now on areas that he will be focusing on. Of course, we need to focus a lot on agric. We need to reduce our over-reliance on food imports. We need to reduce the use of scarce foreign exchange in procuring poultry and rice and all kinds of things that we are able to produce.
We'll wait for that. And so we'll wait for that time when you'll be sharing with us the broad vision in terms of what the former president intends to bring on board. But let's do this quickly. So the director of communications for the New Patriotic Party, Richard Ahiagba, has been talking tough since the announcement of the former president picking off his nomination forms. Now, Richard Ahiagba, let's watch what he says about what he makes of the former president John Dramani Mahama.
Building new Ghana. Na NDC so ene betima building new Ghana. Ya ye bi pen, ya secure democracy ama obia.
Wanted to bring you the footage of okay, so we actually wanted to bring you the footage of Richard Ahiagba. What he said essentially is that nobody, in fact, John Dramani Mahama it's a no match for them because they think he's indecisive and he doesn't know, he can't do the job. Because there have been times when he's been asked about whether he wants to make a comeback, he's been dilly-dallying with his responses as to whether he wants to make a comeback or not. Now, finally, he's made up his mind and he wants to make a comeback. So they believe he's an indecisive individual. What do you make of this description of the former president as the director, as made by the director of communications?
Well, of course, if decisiveness has to do with destroying the economy of this country and inflation rising to 54%, then of course President Mahama does not belong there. If, our debt stock would have to rise from 121 to an unsustainable level of in excess of 500 billion. And that is decisiveness. I'm afraid we don't belong there. If, gross nepotism is decisiveness, then of course he does not belong there. And so if we decide to turn the meaning of the words upside down and apply them, that's our business. We know that President John Dramani Mahama has no equal. It is quite obvious that when it comes to the MPP, they have no men, they have boys.
Okay.
And what we are looking forward now is the elections come December 2024.
Before you take leave of us, because we have to go, but just a quick one. It's a question I've been wanting to ask you because of your standing within the Christian community. I mean, I know that you are a member of the Board of Trustees at Perez Chapel. What do you make of the issue or the raging debate about whether Ghana actually needs a cathedral or not? And I'm happy that you're here, so I'll pick your thoughts on that because of your standing within the Christian community. Where do you stand as to whether we need a cathedral?
Well, we need to look at that in 4 perspectives.
Okay.
1, purpose. 2, priority. 3, process. And 4, perhaps people. When it comes to the purpose, I don't think that having a cathedral for God is a major issue for most Christians. Of course, no Christian has gone out of his way to, as it were, castigate and
kick against
the idea of having a cathedral. Mm-hmm. Of course, there have been complaints about whether it should be a priority, particularly at a time when government has run down the economy, at a time when government is facing real crisis, at a time when, without the IMF support, government is grinding to a halt. Is that our priority? Of course, that is where the debate starts. But the area that attracts a lot more attention, that you find a lot of people engaged in, is the processes. And so the purpose, there's no real challenge. We have a problem with priority, and the process is the key area. The process includes the management of the project. It includes the financing of the project. It includes accountability. And all these are lacking. And so when you hear the NDC complaining about the cathedral, we are more concerned about the process. And again, we are concerned about the people. We are concerned about the double identity of individuals in there. We are talking about so these are the real challenges that
you have with the
cathedral.
And I'm
cathedral.
happy you didn't delve into this because it's a whole topic on its own that you would have to make time to talk about. So I'm glad that you were able to make time to pass by this evening to talk to us about what I call the John Mahama comeback and the role you've played so far. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. And I want to invite all Ghanaians to support President John Dramani Mahama.
Right.
He offers the best leadership that the NDC requires and that Ghana requires at this material time. Okay. And it is our hope that Ghanaians would give the NDC and President Mahama another chance. It provides him with an opportunity to reflect over the past, examine what the NPP has done wrong, and be able to, as it were, come back strongly, hit the ground running, and address the myriad of challenges that this country economy is going through.
Thank you so very much, and it's always a pleasure talking to you, sir.